To my beloved child, stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, before you decide that this is just another message, I want you to understand something. You did not arrive here because you were looking for entertainment. You arrived here because something inside you has been asking a question that you haven't been able to answer. Why does it feel like something is happening behind the scenes? Why have certain people suddenly become distant? Why did someone who used to talk to you suddenly become quiet? Why did an opportunity disappear without explanation? Why have you been feeling like your life is being discussed somewhere you cannot see? And most importantly, why does it feel like your name is being mentioned in places you were never invited to? My beloved child, listen carefully. There was a conversation, and your name came up. You were not there. You were never supposed to hear it. You didn't know it was happening. You couldn't see the faces. You couldn't hear the words. But something was being discussed about you. And the strange thing is, the conversation may not have been about your past, it may have been about your future. Think about that for a moment. Someone may have been speaking about you because something connected to your life is beginning to move. Maybe they were discussing an opportunity. Maybe they were questioning your abilities. Maybe they were asking why you suddenly changed. Maybe they were wondering how you survived everything you went through. Maybe someone was trying to understand why you didn't break when they expected you to. Because there are people who only recognize your value after they lose access to you. There are people who don't understand your silence. They think your silence means weakness. They don't realize that sometimes silence is the place where strength is rebuilt. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped defending every decision. You stopped trying to convince everyone that your heart was sincere. And something changed, not necessarily around you, but inside you. You became quieter, more observant, more careful about who receives access to your heart. And perhaps that's why certain conversations started happening without you. Because when people can no longer control the version of you they see, they begin talking about the version of you they cannot understand. My beloved child, I want you to remember something. Not every conversation about you is a bad conversation. Read that again in your heart. Not every conversation about you is a bad conversation. Somebody may have spoken your name with respect. Someone may have said something about your character. Someone may have remembered something you did for them years ago. Someone may have said, "There's something different about that person." Someone may have asked, "Where are they now?" Someone may have wondered, "What happened to them?" And someone else may have answered, "They're doing better than you think." You see, you don't know what people say when you are not in the room. And that's exactly why you should stop living for the approval of people who only know a small chapter of your story. There is a version of your story that you know. There is a version other people think they know. And then there is the version that has been unfolding quietly while you were simply trying to survive. Maybe you've spent months wondering why things didn't happen when you wanted them to. Maybe you prayed, you waited, you tried again, you were disappointed. You watched other people move forward while you seemed to remain in the same place. And there were moments when you secretly wondered, did I miss my moment? No, you may not have missed your moment. You may have been prepared for it. And sometimes preparation looks painfully similar to delay. That's the part nobody tells you. Preparation can look like rejection. Preparation can look like loneliness. Preparation can look like a closed door. Preparation can look like people leaving. Preparation can look like being misunderstood. And preparation can even look like your name being discussed behind closed doors before the opportunity connected to your name ever reaches you. So if you have recently felt like something is happening behind the scenes, don't ignore that feeling, but don't become paranoid either. This isn't a message telling you to suspect everyone around you. It is a reminder to become discerning. There is a difference between fear and discernment. Fear says, "Everyone is against me." Discernment says, "Not everyone needs access to me." Fear makes you react. Discernment teaches you to pause. And my beloved child, you are entering a season where pausing may be more powerful than reacting, because the conversation you were never supposed to hear may reveal something about the person you are becoming. Someone may have remembered your name. Someone may have questioned your absence. Someone may have noticed your growth. Someone may have wondered why you no longer chase what you once begged for. And that is where the story becomes interesting, because there is a reason your name came up. And before this message ends, you are going to understand why that matters. So if something inside you says, "I've been feeling this," write in the comments, "I was meant to hear this." Not because a comment magically changes your future, but because sometimes putting your realization into words helps you recognize what your heart has been trying to tell you. Now stay with me, because the next part is where the conversation becomes personal. Someone didn't just mention your name, someone connected your name to something you thought was already over, and you are not going to expect what it was. My beloved child, there is something you need to understand about hidden conversations. People don't usually talk about what has no significance. They talk about what has caught their attention. And your name may have entered that conversation because something about you changed. Maybe they noticed that you stopped chasing them. Maybe they noticed that you stopped asking for approval. Maybe they noticed that you became comfortable walking alone. Maybe they noticed that you stopped explaining why you were hurt. At first, they may have thought your silence was temporary. Then days became weeks. Weeks became months. And eventually, they realized you were not returning to the old version of yourself. That's when people start asking questions. What happened to them? Why don't they respond anymore? Why don't they come around? Why are they different? And perhaps someone answered, "They've changed." But here's the truth. You didn't become cold. You became careful. There is a difference. You didn't stop caring. You simply stopped allowing your care to destroy your peace. And there are people who will misunderstand that. They may call you distant. They may call you proud. They may say you think you're better than them. But they were not there when you were rebuilding yourself. They didn't see the nights you questioned everything. They didn't hear the prayers you whispered when nobody else knew you were struggling. They didn't see the moments when you almost gave up. They only saw the version of you that finally stood back up. And sometimes people become uncomfortable when they realize you survived something they thought would destroy you. That's why the conversation may have happened. Your name may have become a question. How did they do it? How are they still standing? Why didn't they become bitter? And maybe someone said something that you never expected. They're not the same anymore. My beloved child, that sentence is more powerful than you realize, because sometimes the greatest evidence of transformation isn't what you gain, it's what no longer controls you. The insult that used to destroy your mood doesn't have the same power. The rejection that once kept you awake doesn't control your thoughts anymore. The person you once begged to stay can walk away, and you still know who you are. That's growth. And growth makes certain conversations happen. But there is another possibility. Perhaps your name was mentioned because someone is considering giving you an opportunity, maybe a position, maybe an invitation, maybe a connection, maybe someone is looking for a person they can trust, and your name came up. You may be sitting there thinking, "Why would anyone choose me?" Because you are looking at yourself through the lens of your struggles. Other people may be seeing something different. They may see reliability. They may see resilience. They may see creativity. They may see character. They may see something you stopped noticing because you became too familiar with your own pain. Sometimes you need to step outside your own story to see what others see in you. Imagine this, a room. Several people are sitting around a table. You aren't there. Your name appears in the conversation. One person says, "We need someone for this." Another person pauses. Then they say your name. Suddenly the room becomes quiet. Someone asks, "Are you sure?" And the answer is, "Yes." Now imagine that the thing they are discussing is connected to something you have been praying about, something you've almost given up on, something you thought was no longer possible. This is where you need to be careful. Don't assume every coincidence is a divine sign. Don't turn every conversation into a prophecy. Instead, stay open, stay grounded, stay prayerful, and pay attention to what unfolds naturally. Because sometimes the answer doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a message, a phone call, an email, an unexpected introduction, a person remembering you, an opportunity appearing at the exact moment you stopped forcing it. That's how life changes, quietly, and then suddenly. You may have been looking for a huge sign, while the real sign was simply that your name was still being remembered. Think about that. You thought you were forgotten, but somewhere, someone still remembered you. Someone still believed in your ability. Someone still remembered your kindness. Someone still remembered the work you did. Someone still remembered the promise you made. Someone still remembered the way you showed up when nobody else did. And now your name is back in the conversation, not because you chased it, but because you left an impression. That's why character matters. You can lose money and rebuild. You can lose an opportunity and find another. You can lose popularity and regain it. But the reputation you build through consistent character follows you into rooms you haven't entered yet. That's why you don't need to attend every conversation about you. Let your character speak when you're absent. Let your work speak when you're silent. Let your consistency speak when people question you. And most importantly, don't destroy your peace trying to find out who said what. Some information is not meant to be chased. Some answers arrive when you're ready to receive them. There is another detail about this conversation, though. Someone connected your name to your past, and this is the part that may hurt. Because the past they mentioned wasn't your proudest chapter. It was the chapter you thought you had buried, the mistake, the failure, the rejection, the season when you weren't yourself. Someone remembered it. And for a moment, you might think that's bad news. But wait, because what happened next changed the entire conversation. And that is where we are going next. My beloved child, someone remembered your past, and perhaps that is exactly what you've been afraid of. You have changed. But what if people still remember who you used to be? What if they bring up the mistake? What if they talk about the season when you were lost? What if they remember the decision you wish you could change? What if someone tells another person about the version of you that you're no longer proud of? Listen carefully. Your past can be part of your story without being the destination of your story. Don't let somebody else's memory become your identity. People can remember your worst day. That doesn't mean your worst day is your definition. Someone can remember when you failed. That doesn't mean you are a failure. Someone can remember when you were confused. That doesn't mean you are permanently lost. Someone can remember when you were broken. That doesn't mean you are still broken. And this is where the conversation changed. Someone mentioned your past, but another person responded differently. They didn't judge you by the old chapter. They said something like, "That isn't who they are anymore." Imagine that. Someone defending the person you became when you weren't even there to defend yourself. That's the part you don't see. While you've been worrying about who talks about you, someone may be talking about your growth. While you've been thinking everyone remembers your mistakes, someone may be remembering how far you've come. While you've been trying to prove that you have changed, someone may already see it. My beloved child, you don't need to keep knocking on every door asking people to acknowledge your transformation. Keep walking. The right people will recognize it. The wrong people may continue using your past as a weapon, and that tells you something. Not about your worth, about their willingness to understand. There is a powerful moment in every person's life when they realize, I cannot control what people say about me. That moment can feel frightening, but eventually, it becomes freedom, because once you accept that people will misunderstand you sometimes, you stop living your life trying to prevent misunderstanding. You stop rewriting every message. You stop explaining every decision. You stop checking who viewed your story. You stop wondering why someone didn't respond. You stop chasing closure from people who don't know how to give it. You start living. And that is exactly when something strange happens. The people who expected you to remain stuck begin noticing that you're moving. The people who expected you to keep asking for permission notice that you're making decisions. The people who thought you needed them notice that you can stand without them. And suddenly, your name becomes interesting again. But here's the deeper lesson. Never confuse being discussed with being defeated. You can be misunderstood and still be on the right path. You can be criticized and still be growing. You can be rejected and still be valuable. You can be forgotten by one person and remembered by another. You can lose access to one room and discover that another room was waiting for you. This is why I don't want you to spend the next season obsessing over who is talking about you. I want you to ask a better question. What am I becoming? Because that question gives you your power back. Now let me take you deeper. There may be someone in your life who has already made a decision about you. They have already decided what they think you're capable of. They have already placed you inside a box. They think they know your limits. They think they know how far you'll go. They think they know what you'll never accomplish. And perhaps you have spent too much time trying to prove them wrong. Stop. You don't need to prove anything. Your life is not a courtroom. You don't need to present evidence to everyone who doubts you. Your results will speak. Your peace will speak. Your consistency will speak. Your character will speak. Your future will speak. And one day, someone who underestimated you may hear your name again. But this time, the conversation will be different. They won't be asking, "Whatever happened to them?" They may be asking, "How did they get there?" That's why you cannot quit during the chapter where nobody understands what you're becoming. Some chapters are written in silence. Some victories happen without an audience. Some breakthroughs begin when nobody is clapping. And some of the greatest changes in your life begin with one simple thing: someone remembering your name. Maybe you've been praying for an opportunity. Maybe you've been praying for restoration. Maybe you've been praying for clarity. Maybe you've been praying for a fresh beginning. But what if the answer begins before you see it? What if the right person hears your name before you ever meet them? What if the opportunity is discussed before it is offered? What if the door is prepared before you even know there is a door? That's why you need patience, not passive waiting. Prepared waiting. There is a difference. Prepared waiting says, "I don't know when it will happen, but I will be ready when it does." And that is where your focus should be. Prepare your mind, prepare your character, prepare your skills, prepare your heart, prepare your faith, because sometimes the delay isn't punishment. Sometimes it is preparation for the weight of what you've been asking for. You asked for a bigger opportunity, but can you handle bigger responsibility? You asked for recognition, but can you handle criticism? You asked for abundance, but can you manage it wisely? You asked for love, but can you communicate honestly? You asked for a new chapter, but are you willing to stop rereading the old one? My beloved child, this is where the hidden conversation becomes a mirror. The conversation isn't only revealing what other people think about you, it is revealing what you think about yourself. And there is one final thing you need to hear, because the person who mentioned your name may not have been trying to help you. They may have been testing whether you were still the same person. And what happened next was the last thing they expected. Hashtag part 4. They expected the old you. My beloved child, there are people who become comfortable with the version of you they once knew. They remember the person who apologized first, the person who always reached out, the person who tolerated disrespect, the person who explained everything, the person who was afraid of being alone, the person who needed everyone to understand. And when you change, they don't always celebrate. Sometimes they test you. They want to know if the old version is still available. So they send the message, they make the comment, they bring up the past, they create the opportunity for you to react. And then they watch. They're waiting to see, will you become the old you again, but maybe this time you don't react. You don't argue. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't explain. You simply breathe and continue walking. That silence can confuse people because they were expecting a reaction. They were expecting access. They were expecting the old pattern. But you are not there anymore. And that may be what was discussed in that hidden conversation. Someone may have said, "They've really changed." Another person may have disagreed, and then someone else may have said, "Give them time, you'll see." My beloved child, never underestimate the power of becoming consistent. People may not believe your words, but eventually, they cannot ignore your patterns. If you say you're changing, show it. If you say you're healing, live differently. If you say you want peace, stop feeding chaos. If you say you trust the future, stop constantly running back to the past. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. And maybe your name came up because someone finally noticed that honesty. Someone saw that you weren't pretending anymore. You weren't trying to impress. You weren't performing. You were simply becoming who you were meant to become. And there is something beautiful about that, because the most powerful transformation isn't loud. It doesn't need an announcement. It happens quietly. You wake up one morning and realize the thing that used to control you no longer controls you. You realize you can hear someone's opinion without allowing it to destroy your confidence. You realize you can lose something without losing yourself. You realize you can be alone without feeling abandoned. You realize you can wait without becoming desperate. You realize you can say no without feeling guilty. You realize you can walk away without needing revenge. That's maturity. And perhaps this is why the conversation happened now, because you are entering a season where your name may travel into rooms you cannot enter yourself. Your work may be discussed. Your character may be evaluated. Your ability may be considered. Your future may be questioned. And you won't be there to control the conversation. That's okay. You were never meant to control every conversation. You were meant to control your response. Let people talk. Let people wonder. Let people misunderstand. You don't have to chase every rumor. You don't have to correct every assumption. You don't have to answer every accusation. Some things become clearer with time. Now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine that 6 months from now, you are sitting somewhere completely different. Your life has changed, not necessarily because everything became perfect, but because you became stronger. You look back at the version of yourself who was crying over things that no longer matter, and you realize, I thought that was the end. But it wasn't. It was a redirection. The closed door wasn't the end. The silence wasn't the end. The rejection wasn't the end. The conversation wasn't the end. It was all part of a transition. And maybe that's what this message is really about. Not about discovering who spoke your name, but discovering why you no longer need to be afraid when your name is spoken. Because your identity is no longer dependent on someone's opinion. Think about that. If someone praises you, you remain grounded. If someone criticizes you, you remain grounded. If someone remembers your past, you remain grounded. If someone celebrates your future, you remain grounded. That is stability. And stability is powerful. So if you have been feeling like your life is changing quietly, don't force the next chapter. Prepare for it. If someone reaches out unexpectedly, don't immediately assume what it means. Listen. If an opportunity appears, evaluate it. If someone from your past returns, look at their actions, not just their words. If someone suddenly remembers your name, ask yourself whether the connection aligns with the person you're becoming. Discernment. Not paranoia, faith, not fantasy, hope, not desperation, my beloved child. There is a reason I keep bringing you back to this, because you may be tempted to make the wrong part of this message the main part. You may want to know, who was talking about me? But the better question is, what was being said about me? And even more important, who am I becoming when I'm not there to defend myself? That is the real test. Because your character is what remains when your audience disappears. Your integrity is what remains when nobody is watching. Your faith is what remains when the answer hasn't arrived yet. Your strength is what remains when applause disappears. And your identity is what remains when someone else refuses to validate you. So, let them talk. Let them remember the old you. Let them wonder about the new you. You keep walking. Because there is one more piece of this story. The conversation did not end with your past. It ended with your future. Someone asked a question, and the answer may explain why you have been feeling like something is about to change. The question was simple. What's next for them? And the answer was not what you think. Hashtag part 5. What's next for them? My beloved child, the question was, what's next for them? Not, what happened to them? Not, why did they disappear? Not, why did they change? But, what's next for them? Do you understand the difference? That question means the conversation had moved beyond your past. People were no longer only looking at where you had been. They were wondering where you were going. And perhaps that is exactly where your attention needs to move to. Stop spending all your energy explaining yesterday. Start preparing for tomorrow, because you cannot build a new chapter while constantly trying to convince everyone that the old chapter wasn't your fault. You don't need to keep defending your past. You learned from it. You survived it. You grew through it. And now, you move, my beloved child. Maybe your name was mentioned because someone sees potential. Maybe because someone remembers your work. Maybe because someone trusts your character. Maybe because someone believes you can handle something bigger. Maybe because an opportunity is beginning to take shape. Or maybe the conversation was simply a reminder that you have been worrying too much about what other people think. Whatever the reason, do not miss the lesson. Your name can be spoken in a room you haven't entered yet. Your future can be discussed before you see it. Your opportunity can be prepared before you receive it. Your answer can be moving before you recognize it. And your next chapter can begin quietly. That is why I don't want you to force anything. Don't chase people because you think they know something. Don't interrogate friends. Don't become obsessed with secret conversations. Don't start assuming everyone is talking about you. Instead, become so grounded that you can hear your name mentioned without losing your peace. If something is meant for you, you will not have to destroy yourself to obtain it. If an opportunity is right, you can evaluate it without desperation. If a relationship is healthy, you won't have to constantly beg for clarity. If a door opens, you can walk through it wisely, and if a door closes, you can survive that too. Because your future is bigger than one door. My beloved child, there is something I want you to release tonight, the need to know everything you don't need to know who said your name. You don't need to know every word. You don't need to know who agrees with you. You don't need to know who doubts you. You don't need to know who changed their opinion. You don't need to know every detail of what happens behind closed doors. Sometimes peace begins when you stop demanding information that was never necessary for your next step. You only need enough clarity to take the next step. One step, then another, then another. That's how journeys happen, not all at once. And perhaps you've been frustrated because you wanted the entire map. But maybe all you were ever promised was enough light for the next step. So take it. If the opportunity comes, be ready. If the call comes, listen carefully. If someone returns, look at their actions. If a new person enters your life, don't force the connection. If an old door opens, ask whether it still belongs to the person you have become. Because not every door that reopens is meant to be entered. Sometimes a door opens again just so you can finally realize you don't want what's behind it anymore. That is growth. And here's something else. Don't be surprised if the people who once underestimated you eventually change the way they speak about you. Not because you chased their approval, but because your life became undeniable. Quiet consistency has a way of changing conversations. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove them wrong. You don't need to make them regret losing you. Just become so committed to your growth that their opinion becomes background noise. Let your peace be your answer. Let your discipline be your answer. Let your character be your answer. Let your future be your answer. And if your name is mentioned, let it be because you became someone worth remembering. My beloved child, maybe this is the part you needed to hear. You are not required to know what everyone says about you. You are required to know who you are. You are not required to control everyone's perception. You are required to control your response. You are not required to force the future. You are required to prepare for it. And you are not required to understand every delay. You are required to keep moving. There will be seasons when your name is nowhere to be seen. And there will be seasons when suddenly your name appears everywhere. A message, an invitation, an opportunity, a recommendation, a connection, a conversation. One small thing can open another. And when it happens, you may look back and realize, I thought nothing was happening. But something was happening. It just wasn't happening where you could see it. That is the mystery of life. Not everything important happens in front of you. Some things happen quietly. Some relationships form before you meet. Some opportunities develop before they reach you. Some decisions are made before you're informed. Some doors are unlocked before you ever touch the handle. And sometimes, your name is mentioned before your next chapter begins. So if this message found you at a strange time, maybe don't rush past it. Take a breath. Look at your life. Ask yourself, what am I being prepared for? What do I need to release? What old version of myself am I still carrying? Or what would I do differently if I stopped living for everyone's approval? Those questions matter more than discovering who talked about you. And if you have been waiting for a sign, let this be your reminder to stay awake to your own life. Not paranoid, awake, not fearful, discerning, not desperate, prepared. My beloved child, the conversation may have happened without you. Your name may have been mentioned when you weren't there, but your story is still being written, and you don't need to hear every conversation to know that your next chapter can be different. So walk forward, quietly, confidently, patiently. Let the people who misunderstand you misunderstand. Let the people who doubt you doubt. Let the people who remember your past remember it. You know what you have learned. You know what you have survived. You know how much you have changed. And you know that the person you are becoming is more important than the person you used to be. If this message connected with something you've been experiencing, don't just write a random comment. Write, my name may be mentioned, but my future belongs to me. Let that be your reminder. Not that every hidden conversation is supernatural, not that everyone is secretly watching you, but that you no longer need to live in fear of what happens behind your back. Your character can speak when you're absent. Your work can speak when you're silent. Your growth can speak when you don't defend yourself. And your future can speak louder than your past ever did. So, my beloved child, keep going. The conversation is not the end of your story. It may simply be the beginning of a chapter you haven't seen yet. And one day, you may understand why your name had to come up in that room. Until then, stay grounded, stay faithful, stay prepared, and keep becoming the person you were created to become. Because sometimes, the most important conversation about your future happens long before you ever hear your name being called. And when your moment finally arrives, you won't need to announce yourself. They will already know your name.